Hey guys, it is Wingy here and welcome back to my channel and welcome back to my top 10 best and worst Doctor Who stories. Continuing the theme of the new series, I thought, yeah, I was a bit harsh with some of the other stories. So I'm going to be looking at some of the best stories from the new series, because believe it or not, I do actually like some of them. So let's just get straight into this list and kick off my top 10 best new series Doctor Who stories. This is really dragging out, just get on with it. Title sequence, go! Rise of the Cybermen and Age of Steel. This is on here for a few reasons. First of all, I love the Cybermen, and this was the first time that they properly returned into the new series. It wasn't my first introduction to them because I'd previously seen them in Earthshock, which is one of my favourite Doctor Who stories ever. But this was the story that solidified my love for the Cybermen. It took inspiration from a Big Finish audio known as Spare Parts, which if you haven't listened to, go and listen to it. I mean, finish this video first, but then go and listen to it. This story was so good because we see the Cybermen in a way that I've always wanted to see them. The concept of the Cybermen is a bit too adult and a bit too much for kids, really. They are essentially us, and they are dragged out of their homes against their will and turned into Cybermen. Emotionless robots, essentially. And we get some really creepy moments. People who start off the story as humans end up at the end of the story as Cybermen. We get these slow, lumbering Cybermen just chasing people and just not stopping. We get to see glimpses of the conversion process. I can see a lot of this story happening in real life. Plus, it's set on a parallel Earth as well, which definitely adds to this story. Really strong guest cast in this story as well. Roger Lloyd Pack, who is famous for playing Trigger in Only Fools and Horses, you see him in a completely different way, and he eventually becomes a cyber controller. This story has some great imagery and some great moments for the Cybermen. Whilst I'm not overly keen on the redesign, I still prefer the designs of the 80s. This story did a really good job bringing the Cybermen back into Doctor Who. Well, it just took over one series, but Capaldi finally got a story that I didn't really have an issue with. Under the Lake and Before the Flood is fantastic. As I said, it was finally the moment where I thought, great, you've given Capaldi a story that is just good. We get a story messing around with time travel, which is something that weirdly Doctor Who doesn't really do that much of. Never mind the wibbly wobbly timey-wimey shite that Moffat came up with. This story starts in the future and then the second part is in the past, and then they sort of merge together and they have to figure, yeah, it is wibbly wobbly timey-wimey, but it's bloody good. The ghosts are really creepy as well. They've literally got no eyes. Like, that is a bit on the knuckle for me. If I was a kid, not now. We get the Fisher King, who is a great design for a Doctor Who monster. He reminds me of something that they would have done in the 80s. You know, he's just a giant rubber lumbering monster. However, he has the guy from Slipknot voicing him. Well, his screams anyway. That's pretty hardcore, like for Doctor Who. A bit of Slipknot, that is pretty cool. Is it Slipknot? I don't listen to metal. I hope it's Slipknot. I'm gonna look it up. I didn't look it up. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Really great story. Capaldi is fantastic. I like the elements of time travel. The ghosts are really cool. And it's a base under siege. We don't really get too many base under siege stories in the new series, so it was really refreshing to get one. It just reminded me of the Patrick Troughton days, you know, like some really great stories they had then. But yeah, it's a very strong story. Probably the strongest of series... Oh no. Now, there's another story from Series 9 on this list, but it is so close to being the strongest story of Series 9. Definitely better than anything in Series 8, anyway. Time of Angels and Flesh and Stone next, and before anyone asks, nope, Blink is not going to be on this list. This is the only Weeping Angel story that is going to appear on this list. Hear me out. Blink, I find, is very overrated.
I put it to riot. I put it to riot.
It isn't bad in the slightest. I think it's great, but I feel in the long run it has become more and more overrated as time has gone on. And I feel like when people ask, I'm trying to get into Doctor Who, what story should I watch? If you answer Blink, you're kind of doing them a disservice because it isn't really like a Doctor Who story. The Doctor's barely in it. Whereas this story, it gives you the angels, it adds to the mythos of the Weeping Angels, and it just feels like a proper Doctor Who story. Considering that this was Matt Smith's first appearance as the Doctor in terms of recording, because obviously there was like 3 episodes before this one, he settles into the role really, really well. We have River Song in this story as well, who's still a bit of a mystery and not an annoying twat, so that's a positive. And we just have this really, really strong two-parter that I always find myself revisiting. That's the thing about this list. They might not be the best stories in your eyes, but they're stories that I always find myself revisiting. And if I revisit this story more than Blink, it's got to be on this list ahead of it. Plus, I like how it answered something that we were promised, well, not promised, but something that was referenced in Silence of the Library. With the Byzantium, is it? Is that how you pronounce it? The Byzantium? Yeah, the ship anyway. The inclusion of Angel Bob is actually very, very good as well. The angels are images, that was great. The only downside about this story is the gimmick of the Weeping Angels. Because we already knew what they were, the gimmick has sort of wore off in this story, and you actually see them physically move, whereas in Blink you didn't, which is an advantage that Blink has, but it doesn't really detract from this story, because even though you do see them physically move, they're still great until they were ruined a few series later. Cheers, Moth. Another base under siege with Waters of Mars next. David Tennant's penultimate story, as much as I give shit to the End of Time, this was amazing. Sees the Doctor by himself, which reminds me of the old days like Deadly Assassin and more or less it, but Deadly Assassin. And he just walks in, you know, everything seems fine. Just so happens that he stumbled across a crew of people who are the first people on Mars and are all destined to die. And I like how it plays with the Doctor, like, they kind of make him out like he is the highest authority in Doctor Who. They're clearly forgetting about the Black and White Guardian, but sure, why not? So in this story, I like how they kind of address the issues that fans had with that. It shows you the consequences of the Doctor being this high power in the universe. It shows him that, yeah, you can't just dictate what can and can't happen. You don't have that power. We get a really creepy monster, we get a great performance from Lindsay Duncan, and a really, really good performance from David Tennant, actually. And I just love that his base under siege is great. This is one of the Tennant episodes that I found myself revisiting a lot. It's just sort of high paced, like this story doesn't really slow down. Once it gets going, it keeps going and it doesn't really stop. The robot is a bit dumb, but I can let it off. Yeah, he's alright. I don't like the bit where they're racing on him though, that's a bit dumb. But other than that, this story is fairly solid and 100 times better than The End of Time. This should have been his last story, god damn it. Day of the Doctor. It's gotta be on here. Some people seem to have a lot of issues with Day of the Doctor. I don't understand that. I thought, considering the restrictions that they had and what they could do and what they couldn't do, this is probably the best result. We get the Zygons back after God knows how many years, was it like 40 something? With a great redesign. I don't know why that great redesign didn't come with the Silurians as well, but oh well. We get to see the Daleks again, obviously. We get the 10th Doctor back again. We get to see Peter Capaldi before he even regenerates from Matt Smith. We get to see all of the different Doctors saving Gallifrey. We get a dream casting of the Doctor in John Hurt. Was the War Doctor unnecessary? Maybe, but he's John Hurt. Would I have preferred Christopher Eccleston to be in the episode as opposed to the War Doctor? Maybe, but he's John Hurt. Would I have preferred maybe Paul McGann to come back properly as opposed to that little mini episode? Probably, but John fucking Hurt, man. That is dream casting. Like, I cannot understand how that casting managed to happen. That is something that you think, oh, that'd be good, but it's never gonna happen. Oh no, it did. It really happened. John Hurt was once the Doctor. That is amazing. This story isn't perfect by any stretch, but it plays on your nostalgia. It celebrates the past 50 years of Doctor Who a bit, but it mostly focuses on the new series. But either way, it still gives you a really, really enjoyable episode. I never stop smiling during this story. There's always little moments that make me chuckle. There's always little references that I keep picking up on. I remember when I watched it for the first time, and it was genuinely the first time I'd been excited to see a brand new episode of Doctor Who in a long, long time. But this episode did something else. This episode for me will always have a special place in my heart for one significant reason. It did the impossible. For years, there was one man in Doctor Who history who always acknowledged that he loved the show and everything like like that, but he never really returned. He wasn't there in the Five Doctors. He may have been there in Dimensions in Time, but only a little bit. And until a few years ago, he didn't bother doing Big Finish. And yet, there he was in Day of the Doctor, my favourite Doctor, Tom Baker. There he was. It was the man who is the Doctor stood with the Doctor. It was so bizarre seeing my favourite Doctor and someone who I'd grown up with as my childhood hero back in Doctor Who again. And I know other Doctors kicked off, and especially Colin Baker, who said if Tom was in it, they all should have been in it. And I mean this with no disrespect whatsoever to Colin Baker or any of the other Doctors. If it wasn't Tom Baker, that scene would not have been impactful in any way, shape or form. Tom Baker is and always will be the Doctor. There is no other actor who will be or will embody that role as much as Tom Baker has. So to see him back there once again, I can't tell you how happy that made me. And as much as I give Moffat shit, I will always thank him for doing that, because he didn't need to do it, but he did. One of my favourite moments in Doctor Who history when the curator steps up. And also, I love the fact that they reversed the Time War. I really like that. And they gave us a regeneration. Yeah, I kind of focused on Tom Baker a bit too much there, didn't I? I mean, I've got to, because he's right there. Old Doctors, new Doctors, a Doctor yet to come, a regeneration, Daleks, Zygons, Gallifrey, Unit. Pretty fucking cool. If it wasn't for a story that is going to come on my list a little bit later on, I would say this story has the best performance by any Doctor ever. Heaven Sent was incredible. This is the thing that annoys me about Moffat. He gives us complete and utter shit, and then he gives us this. A story where the Doctor is essentially by himself mourning the death of a companion. It is so beautifully written. There's so many intricate pieces to this story. I wasn't sure where to put this on my list, because I didn't know if I preferred this over the other Capaldi story I had on this list. But this story was brilliant. For Capaldi alone, this story has got to be on this list. The design of the monster in this story is really, really creepy as well. There's a few things I don't like about this story, like the weird mind palace in the TARDIS. Too similar to Sherlock for me. And the fact that the Doctor punches a wall made of diamond, oh no, sorry, 400 times diamond or something like that. Yeah, that isn't your best, Moffat. But everything else about this story is brilliant. Capaldi is incredible. The whole story of the Doctor sort of killing himself and revitalizing himself, the rooms changing, the fact that the Doctor is constantly on the move. This story is brilliant. This is probably going to end up on most people's best lists when it comes to the new series. And rightly so. I thoroughly enjoy watching it every single time. It's just a shame about what followed the week after. Yep. This next story is on here because this was a story that genuinely worried me at the time. As you are probably aware, the 11th Hour is the first full story to feature Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor. And for me, I was really, really worried. One of my favourite Doctors at the time had just left. We have a completely new cast, a new production team, and Matt Smith's regeneration scene did not fill me with hope. Yeah, no offence to Matt Smith, but that first regeneration scene is quite bad. And then we get the 11th Hour, which is a brilliant, fast-paced story where the Doctor has to rely on his wits. It gives us a unique and really good introduction to a companion. Matt Smith just falls into the role of the Doctor. I said that before, but obviously this is the first time that we, the audience, would have seen it properly. This story is brilliant. The Atraxi's great. Matt Smith is great. Karen Gillan is great. Olivia Colman is in this story as well. Underused, but she's still really good. And for me, this is one of the best regeneration stories or post-regeneration stories that Doctor Who has ever given us. If it wasn't for Spearhead from Space, I'd probably give it to this. And now we come to my favourite David Tennant story. Yep, this is the last David Tennant story on this list. Silence in the Library is my favourite David Tennant story for a few reasons. I'll get the stupid one out the way first. This story introduces us to my favourite variant of the 10th Doctor's costume, so I like it for that reason. But there is more to it than that. This is a really atmospheric story. There's a lot of elements in this story that, in theory, shouldn't really work, but they really do. Catherine Tate is fantastic in these episodes, especially in part 2 where she's got her kids and a husband and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, she's really, really great. We get introduced into a really cool Doctor Who villain, the Vashta Narada, the light skulls and shit. Yeah, it's great. Shadows that eat people. It's such a simple idea, but it really works. We get introduced to River Song, and she actually seems really interesting. The only problem is, with hindsight, I know who she is. But that doesn't stop this story from being really, really cool, with some creepy moments, really great cast, a really strong cliffhanger as well, actually, and a really happy ending, kind of. It still involves death, but it's still quite a good ending. For me, this was the last great David Tennant story. Waters of Mars, I do really love as well, as I mentioned on this list, but he's companionless essentially in that story. I really love the Doctor and Donna. I think they are the best Doctor-companion relationship that we have had in the entire new series. I think Catherine Tate isn't irritating like some people say. I think she's really, really good, and I love the fact that it isn't a romantic relationship. This story, I watch it more than any other David Tennant episode, and I love it even more every single time I watch it. I bet some of you are thinking that I'd forgotten about Christopher Eccleston. I didn't, and this story sees the return of one of the most iconic villains, not only in Doctor Who, but in sci-fi, the Daleks. This was one of the first Doctor Who stories that I ever remember, and my god is it a good one. When I said before with Heaven Sent, if it wasn't for another story on this list, I would say that Heaven Sent is the best performance we ever get from a Doctor. Yeah, but Dalek exists, so I've got to give it to Eccleston in this story. In the classic series, Daleks were more of a parody towards the end than anything else, and then we get this story where there is no joke about the Daleks here. The Doctor is clearly terrified of that thing, and rightly so. This is how Daleks should be portrayed. So in the trailer or the introduction to Bill, whatever it was, where she's joking, oh, it's got a plunger and an egg whisk. Yeah, that egg whisk, that is a laser gun, and that will kill you. Oh, and that plunger, yeah, it does this.
What you gonna do? Sucker me to death?
I'm so glad they finally did something with that. They didn't really do too much with the plunger in the classic series. Yeah, this story's great. Eccleston is incredible. Everyone in this story is pretty good, actually. Except Adam, because no. But I just love the concept of this story that a Dalek feels humanity, so it feels that it has to kill itself. And this episode essentially turned the Doctor into the bad guy and the Dalek into a good guy. But it did it in a way that you can't really get mad at. On the whole, the Dalek stories of the Christopher Eccleston era are amazing. I really, really wanted to put Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways on here, but I haven't. I thought this was clearly the better of the two. The other one's great, don't get me wrong, but Dalek is something else. That entire scene where they're locked up together is one of the most memorable scenes of the entire new series. Maybe even the series as a whole. I just wish more actors and more showrunners and more writers would look at the Daleks the way that they do in this story. This is the epitome of how you should treat Daleks. They are a threat. I just don't get how the Daleks have sunk so low when they started off so strong. And I really, really wish that Rob Shearman would return to Doctor Who. Please do another one. We seriously need you right now. And as much as I love this episode, there's only one story that can beat it for me. After stories like Heaven Sent and Waters of Mars, Dalek, there's only one story that can top all of those for me, and it's The Empty Child. I don't think anyone would dispute that it is a great story, but some people might be wondering why it's my number one. Nostalgia, plain and simply. This was the story where I knew I would be a Doctor Who fan. My first introduction to Doctor Who was via the new series, and series 1 I watched sort of sporadically. This story scared the shit out of me. 10-year-old Wingy was absolutely frightened by this story, and honestly, for 2 years after, I couldn't watch these episodes. They scared me that much. But I knew I was going to be a fan because as much as those two stories, well, 2 episodes scared me, I kept watching and I've never stopped since. And that's just for nostalgia reasons. The story is great. It's set in World War II, which is one of my most favourite eras in history. We're introduced to Captain Jack, who would go on to be one of my favourite Doctor Who characters, as well as get his own spin-off, Torchwood, which is fantastic as well. And we have Richard Wilson with one of the creepiest scenes in this entire story, where he transforms into a gas mask zombie. Yep, done. Nope, nada. 10-year-old me, out of there. It's like everything in this story just comes together. I don't have a single criticism of this story. It's creepy, it's atmospheric, the cast is great, the script is great, the directing is great, everything is great. And it gave me my fear of children in horror movies. That little shit. I don't care what villain scares you the most. The Empty Child scared the fuck out of me. He doesn't anymore. But at the time, my god, My god, it has to be number one for all those reasons. So that is going to be it for my list today, guys. What did you think? Do you agree with my list? Do you not? What would your top 10 best stories of the new series be? Let me know in the comments below. And also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more, as obviously I'm going to be doing the classic series next. And if you did that, I would love you forever. But until next time, guys, take care of yourselves. Goodbye. Exterminate, exterminate, exterminate.